Satanic ska. Yeah, it's a thing, and I have it. Welcome to Atonal, and today we're going to talk about the amazing and bizarre world of the only satanic ska band, D-O-G-G-O-D! Now, before we dive into the world of satanic ska, we have to provide some context of what ska is and its revival in the 1990s. Now, this style of ska is the traditional style of ska, or first wave ska. Now, there are modern bands who have tried to emulate that sound, most notably Hepcat, rest in peace, Greg Lee. Now, fast forward to the 1980s, where you had two-tone ska with bands like Madness, The Selector, The Specials. And at this point, it seemed to be a slightly bit more political, kind of focusing more in on the topic of racism. Now, after that whole movement died out a little bit, then you got the emergence of third-wave ska, or ska punk. Now, in the 1990s, this blew up out of nowhere, and I think the peak started around 1995 or 1996, seems to be when the real big emergence of ska punk entered the scene. You had bands like Real Big Fish, Say Ferris, and in fact, some more popular bands like the Aquabat, No Doubt, and Hoobastank actually started out as ska bands. Yes, Hoobastank was a ska band, and I saw them live at the Barn in UCR, Riverside, California, and they were awful, even by ska band standards. Now, this was almost kind of like a fad. It really kind of popped out of the early 90s, probably 1992, and it kind of reached its apex by 1995, 1996, and completely died in 1999, and the fad was pretty much over. Now, I happen to be a big fan. How I got into punk music to begin with was going to ska shows and seeing other punk bands, because you could not see a punk band without seeing another ska band opening for them, or vice versa. But again, it was so quick, it was almost like if you blinked, you missed it. Now, it is safe to say that most of the third wave bands sounded very similar. In fact, if you were to take a person who had like a passing interest in ska and you were to play them random songs from bands like the Mighty Mighty Boss Tones or Save Ferris, well, maybe not Save Ferris because they had a female singer, but Real Big Fish, they probably couldn't distinguish who was who. But there were a few people who did kind of break the mold. I think the most notable would be the Aquabats. And the Aquabats would have a lot of kind of like Devo influence. But I think the one that really stood out to me, even during the time, was a band called Mephiskapheles.
Hey, what's this button for? Doomsday!
Now, Mephiskapheles started in 1989. Originally, they were called Scatterbrain, and apparently that was already taken, so they kind of worked together and tried to think of a new name, and they came out with Mephiskapheles and kind of really focused in on the kind of satanic kind of vibes that name gave it. Originally, they had two singers. He was a Jamaican guy named Ray. In fact, the original guitarist for Mephiskapheles said in an interview that he didn't even remember his last name. But after the band formed and started becoming more focused, with the other main lead singer as being the focal point of the band, they really started going in on a satanic vibe. There was a lot of speculation then and even now whether or not this band is actually a group of Satanists. I would venture to say that they are not. And here is my reasoning why. Now, Tazy Phillips of the Ska Parade, back when I used to talk to him in the 90s when I was still in high school and was going to a lot of ska shows, did tell me that in passing that they actually were members of the Church of Satan. But I'm not sure that's actually true. And here's why. If you go through the lyrics of all of the Mephiskapheles songs, there's nothing really in there that reflects Anton LaVey's Satanism or actually genuine beliefs in like devil worship or anything to the sort, other than sort of almost tongue-in-cheek kind of references to Satan, like Satan stole my weed. So what exactly makes up satanic ska other than some edgy lyrics? Well, there actually is a difference sonically. First of all, a lot of ska punk bands at the time obviously took punk as a direction for their music. That's what kind of the defining characteristic of third wave ska was, ska punk. But Mephiskapheles had elements of thrash metal, which then again, thrash metal has a lot of punk influence as well, but we're getting Inception here. Now, in ska music, it's usually times to be kind of happy. It's kind of very upbeat, kind of uplifting, but the horn sections are always at a down angle. And also, they kind of distinguish themselves from a lot of other ska bands, which usually kind of play the kind of bass that you see in the background behind me. They actually played an upright bass, and their keyboardist was actually an organ, like a church organ. And together, that really kind of comes off as like a kind of evil, demonic kind of church music with kind of, 1920s satanic sounding horn sections. So all of this together really kind of gives it this kind of upbeat, yet really like evil kind of feel to it. And it's absolutely amazing. They're one of the few ska bands that actually stand out as their own. Like you would hear it and be like, yeah, like, what is ska? Ska? Oh, that's Mephiskapheles. So in 1991, Mephiskapheles introduced their first demo. It was originally a cassette, but I have the reissue on vinyl. And the sound of this is really, let's just say it needed a little bit more working. Doomsdays! So only one of these songs actually did not make it to their first full-length album, God Bless Satan. But this is something that's kind of like an oddity, something if you wanted to see what this band was originally kind of going for, or what they sounded live in their very early days before they really honed their craft. This is a good, interesting listen. This is not something that I would play in my car or for friends. It's definitely something to show that there's something here. Very rough around the edges. But later on, we would get their very first full-length album, God Bless Satan. And I have to say, this is one of the best album covers I have ever seen in my entire life. Combined with one of the best album titles I've ever heard. And one of the funniest album titles I ever heard, God Bless Satan. I mean, just look at it. Just look at it. It's a devil chicken that says, God bless Satan. I literally can't. But again, none of the band's releases ever came on vinyl up until the new millennium. These are reprints that I got from Jump Up Records, including the demo disc. If you want to check out some of their vinyl works and you want to get some of their vinyl stuff, Jump Up Records is the place to go. Anyways, the band first self-published this album and was quickly picked up by the very famous in the ska circles, Moon Ska Records, which most of the stuff on Moon Ska Records is fantastic. You can just go through the list of the bands that were signed to that label and just go through them, and chances are you've got a winner there. If you like ska music, you may not. So the band, at the time of this releasing, we should talk about the lineup because it's very important. First of all, we have on upright bass, Michael Blitz. We have Greg Robertson on trombone. Osho? Like the cult leader, Osho? Osho Hollywood Indo on trumpet and flugelhornist. Alexander McCabe on saxophone, alto saxophone. Brian Underpants Martin on the organist, which, by the way, he's a fantastic organist. I know I already mentioned it, but I really need to reiterate. He's great. And then Michael the Virgin Reich, the drummerist. I'm not saying anything wrong. Like, that's what's on here. The drummerist. Huh? Which, by the way, he just recently passed away, so rest in peace, buddy. You did amazing work. Brendog, the guitarist, and the Nubian Nightmare.
What's a Nubian?
Shut the fuck up.
The local vocal. But again, you would expect this band to be, oh, we're Satanists, we're coming to kill your children and burn down everything you find sacred. You'd be dead wrong. Now, there's a lot of playful kind of energy that you would get from a band like, I don't know, Skank and Pickle. A lot of very humorous tracks on here. Things that are obviously meant to be jokes. And then things that are supposed to be a little bit more sinister. And what's great about this album is that it actually comes with a cover of a very popular 1970s song, the Bumblebee Tuna song.
Yum, yum, bumblebee, bumblebee tuna. I love bumblebee, bumblebee tuna.
Yum, yum, bumblebee, bumblebee, tuna. Love a sandwich made with bumblebee.
Now, if you were to ask me, Jim, I want to get into Mephiskapheles, where should I start? This is it. God Bless Satan. Probably their finest work. Not to say their other albums aren't great as well, but I think this is a good toe in the water to see if Satanic ska is for you. Now, that album actually did very well, relatively speaking, to the independent ska scene. It actually sold very well. And in fact, that album's catalog on Moon Ska Records is actually 666. It wasn't by chance, by the way. But in 1997, we got their follow-up album, Maximum Perversion. And boy, is this album also really great. Again, you're getting a lot of kind of playful energy from them. But I feel that this album is a little bit more leaning on the kind of Hepcat side of ska. There's a lot of tracks on here that kind of stand out as traditional ska. This album kind of came out almost a little too late. There was a good 3 years between releases, between the demo, God Bless Satan, and then this album. And by this time, ska was kind of already almost on its decline, so it didn't do nearly as well. But if you're more into the kind of traditional ska, this is probably more up your alley. There is a lot of kind of punky songs in here as well. The kind of demonic sound that you're really looking for if Mephiskapheles has become your bag by this point.
Confrontationer, still stationer. Hope you said goodbye at you. For you, they're trying to, you know they will.
But it's not as much as the other album. There are some times where I would prefer to listen to this album over the other one if I'm trying to be in a more uplifting mood, if I want to listen to something like... So in 1999, ska essentially died. Essentially. I mean, there's still bands that are still making music. There's some groups that are even kind of creating like a fourth wave ska that still exists. But at this point, people weren't going to ska shows anymore. And if you did go to a ska show or like a headlining ska show and there was like a punk band before, people would go see the punk band and then leave before the opening act. And that kind of what happened with me with Mephiskapheles. There was a hardcore band that was opening for Mephiskapheles. I actually convinced a friend of mine to go who didn't like ska to go see them only because there was a hardcore punk band, which he was really into hardcore punk. But I wanted to go see Mephiskapheles. And there was a big crowd, and it was at the Showcase Theater in Corona, California. It was a big crowd for the original band, and then probably like probably like 2/3 of the audience had completely left by the time this band showed up to play songs from their brand new album, which we'll get into in just a second. But I can remember actually seeing the Nubian Nightmare.
What's a Nubian? Bitch, you almost made me laugh.
Kind of looking at the crowd kind of exiting the building before his band went to set. And he almost seemed kind of depressed, and I can kind of feel in his eyes and that he knew something was on the horizon that was not going to be good for his band. But anyways, we did get the release of Mephiskapheles' Maite Waite, which, by the way, as you would imagine, the album is white.
Callous boy, enjoys putting people down. Callous boy, loves the
This is kind of universally regarded as Mephiskapheles' worst album. I can understand why. It's not particularly their best release. It probably is their worst release, at least their original lineup is concerned. Though there was some minor changes by the time this album came. But what's interesting about this album is that it's kind of going for a new sound. There are still a lot of straightforward, demonic ska songs on here. A lot of the kind of more traditional ska songs are kind of completely removed from this album. And there are also a lot of tracks that are kind of different. If you could imagine satanic punk in the same vein as satanic ska, you'd be in the same category. And it seems as though even at the time they created this, they knew that ska was on the way out. They couldn't not play ska because their name is Mephiskapheles. Which, by the way, in the 90s, there was a lot of bands who were putting ska in their name, most notably the Skatalites, the Skatalites. You had Bim Scala Bim, and my personal favorite name for a band, even though they weren't that great, Jimmy Scaffa. Good one, Dad. But what's interesting about this album is that they are trying to do something new. They're not just putting God Bless Satan out 18 times in a row, which a lot of ska bands are still doing. Why?
But why? Why would you do that? Why would you do any of that?
I would say, if you liked the other two, this is definitely worth a listen, but this should be the last one that you've listened to. And in fact, I better not tell the story. I'm not going to tell the story. I'll tell a very edited version of the story. So I talked to someone very significant in the ska industry in some way about a possible reissue of this album after I had already purchased 2 of their reissues on vinyl. This person said, who would buy it? I did. Now, all of these albums were kind of released around the time of 2015. Mephiskapheles had reunited and had started touring again, and then they started writing some new songs, most notably and only up until very recently. I guess this is actually technically considered their self-titled album, but it does say 101001110, which I don't know what that means in binary, and I don't care to look it up. I did try using the QR code for this, and it didn't work. If it actually works for you, let me know. I'm going to hold it up so you can scan it with your phone and tell me what it does. And I don't really. I'll let you tell me. I won't do it myself. You tell me in the comments where this leads me. But we have some interesting tracks from here. Again, they're still playing ska. It seems as though they're kind of focusing a little bit more on that kind of more punkier vibe of Maite Waite, which I enjoy. I think they kind of honed their craft a little bit more on this album. But it's only 6 songs. It's an EP. You're not going to get a lot of play out of this. But it's actually really good, surprisingly good. And I would just like to point out that the the album itself is actually very beautiful. It's actually very beautiful. It's got that kind of black and red splatter. Really nice. So anyways, I did live with this album for a while. It's pretty good. I wouldn't recommend this as a first play if someone had told me, like, introduce me to Satanic ska. I'm sorry. If someone asked me to introduce them to Satanic ska, this would not be the album. But if someone was introduced to Satanic ska and they really liked it, this might be one that I might show them next to see, like, hey, maybe you like the way they went in more recent time. Now, in 2019, they also released a 3-album, I guess it's technically a single, a very short EP, titled Never Born Again. I just recently purchased it, and it didn't get here by the time of this recording. But then again, I ordered it very recently, so it's not their fault. But once I live with it for a little bit, I might make a little quick update video on how good this album actually is. So as of recording this, Mephiskapheles is still on tour. You can still go see them live. It seems as though they kind of favor going more towards the south, which, well, okay, probably not the best of ideas, but hey, they've been doing it a whole lot longer than I have, so I haven't done it at all. But yeah, this band is such an anomaly for this to come out. And remember, at the time in the 90s, it still really wasn't safe to call yourself a Satanist, whereas now it's kind of like a joke, at least in terms of music. If you actually say that you're a Satanist, you'll get some heads turning for sure. But for a band to kind of promote themselves as Satanists by this point, it's kind of lost its edge. By the end of the 90s, it kind of lost its kind of niche factor. But at the time, it was kind of a little bit shocking to see a band actually promote themselves as Satanists. I mean, think about Marilyn Manson. And you'll see bands trying to be a little bit edgy now by not so much referencing Satanism, but the occult and the Illuminati style of symbolism, most notably Tool and Jay-Z. But again, this band is such a weird, like, anomaly for this to come onto the ska scene and just shake everything up and kind of keep it a little bit more lively. You had bands like the Aquabats kind of doing something a little bit different, but this was really different. And by the way, this is still one of the very few ska bands that I will still pick up records and listen to, which is why I own everything that they have on vinyl and one in the mail. But hey, this was a really interesting journey. You got to hear some really weird music, really weird but good music. And I really want to make some more exploratory videos like this in the future. Are there any other oddities that I should know about? Let me know in the comments, and maybe I'll do a deep dive on them as well. So leave a like if you like, and subscribe if you want to see more, and DOG, G-O-D.